I look at it in Jungian terms. So part of the process of personality expansion in the deep psychoanalytic sense is first you're a persona, or first you're nothing. Then you develop a persona, which is a way of presenting yourself in a socially acceptable way to the world. And maybe you confuse yourself with your persona. Now, you've had conversations with people on your podcast who are stiff and you can't get a dynamic conversation going. That's because they're acting out their persona. You're not really talking to them. You're talking to an act that they've constructed. It's a puppet. An act that they've constructed to make themselves socially acceptable to the world.
And sometimes it's just anxiety.
Yeah, sure. It can be anxiety too. But then often under anxious conditions, people will revert to their persona because it's a well-rehearsed set of routines.
Right.
And that they know is socially acceptable. Okay, so for the Jungians, the first step outside the persona was the shadow. Carl Jung, followers of Carl Jung, or students of better terminology, was discovery of the shadow. Oh, I thought I was the good person here, but it turns out that I've got like some dark. And you often see this with, imagine you have hyper-compassionate people who are dependent and they won't engage in conflict, so they're always oppressed. And so then when you talk to them, you find out they're really, really resentful and they have a lot of fantasies of revenge, like a lot. And so then you work with them and you think, okay, you have something to say and do here. You've got some harsh words to say, maybe to your partner. You've got some things to say to your boss. You got to spine up and say it. And that's part of incorporating that, especially aggression. So agreeable people, compassionate people don't like aggression. But that's like not liking sex. It's dangerous, but it's necessary. And so you want to integrate it. And if you don't, it has its own life. You know, you see people all the time who, they're so nice. You can't even be in the same room with them. They're that nice. But they're resentful and passive aggressive. They take it out in all sorts of ways, partly because they're always unhappy. They're often moralistically judgmental because they're not saying what they have to say. They got to integrate that shadow. So that was part of it. And the shadow consists of, in part, all the things about you that you've deemed morally unacceptable and failed to develop. And so sometimes that's aggression, often. Sometimes it's sexuality, often. And so it'll manifest itself in impulsive, aggressive sexuality, say under conditions of alcohol intoxication when it leaks out.
Aggressive, like rough sex?
Yeah, forced. Yeah, definitely.
Forced. So you mean like rape?
Well, or it doesn't have to go all the way to rape. It can be like over-aggressive sexual compulsion in a dating situation. It's strange to those men too, because it's very unsettling for them to see, in the cloud of their niceness and their harmlessness, this deep, dark desire making itself manifest. Yeah, well, it's an open question how much assertiveness there should be in sex. And that the answer is zero. No, I'm not saying in the least that's right. Acceptable. Let me be absolutely clear here.
Well,
that's not acceptable at all.
Not assertive.
No, it's not. It's repressed. It's repressed. It's what's repressed. There's no clearer way of saying it. It's like, look, many men are terrified of women. Many. And so that terror might manifest itself, even in a relationship, in the inability to ever let the partner know what they really want.
They're terrified for what reason? Because of rejection?
Yeah. And then the feelings of inadequacy that produces, often which are necessary. They're necessary.
Right, yeah.
So the second stage of development in the Jungian sense is the integration of counter-sexual possibilities. So I just watched Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, and he's a very charismatic actor. And I was thinking, oh God, because he carried that whole movie on single-handedly. It's a dark, dark movie, and it has to do with resentment. This man who was forced to be nice by his mother, who turns out to be absolutely crazy and abused him like mad when he was a kid. And then he becomes this role model for the dissemination of complete catastrophe into the entire society. It's a story of Cain in part. But Phoenix really carries that, and part of the reason that he does that is because he creates a compelling character who's sympathetic. Like, you can be sympathetic to him because he really did have a hard life, really hard. But Phoenix is an extraordinarily charismatic person, partly because he's so he's masculine in his feature and carved, but he's so graceful. Every single thing he does in the entire movie is a dance. Like, he's conscious of every single movement he makes. Every turn of his head is conscious. It's dance-like. And you can't take your eyes off it. And a lot of stellar performers had that ability to integrate, male performers had that ability to integrate that feminine grace into their masculine character. You saw that with David Bowie. You saw it with Mick Jagger. They're good examples. A lot of those 70s glam rockers were gender benders, long hair, a lot of flashy outfits. And they did show, and they weren't exactly androgynous. That's not the right way to think about it, is they manifested a higher order integration of masculine and feminine, and that made them charismatic. Because
that's Prince. He's the best
Prince,
example.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And so that's high order integration. And I would say that part of the compulsion between adult onset transsexuality of the autogynephilic type is a consequence of the sexual instinct manifesting itself as a guide to the integration of personality across the sex divide.